Well, it's happening. I'm finally podcasting with the most insufferable man on Twitter. I'm kidding. No, it's okay. So we're doing this podcast. I want to say hello to all the Kansas State fans watching and listening. My name is Chris Williams. I'm joined by John Kurtz, and we're doing a little joint pod in preface of the big game coming up on Tuesday night in Hilton Coliseum. Thanks for doing this, John. This will be fun.
No, absolutely. I feel like this has been a long time coming. You know, our worlds have been close to colliding before, and we flirted with it and never actually did it. So I think it's appropriate timing to do it ahead of this game for sure.
I gotta give you a compliment. You have like this Twitter persona or whatever. Um, I think Iowa State fans always kind of liked Kansas State, and I think that you've done more to deteriorate that than any guy I've ever seen. So congratulations on that, on being that guy.
Well, it is quite an honor. I will have to even as humble as you guys know I can be, I will have to bow down to my friends that do the Bosco's Boys podcast, Scott Wildcat, and used to be Grant KSU on Twitter until he got banned about 17 times. Now you know him as Grant Postmortem, if anybody comes across him. But those two guys are really what got me into it, because I was like kind of the same way. And it was like probably around like 2017. I feel like it was maybe the Skyler last second touchdown to Zuber, that sort of era. They really started getting into it on Twitter. And I was kind of like, all right, well, this seems fun. Like, if you guys, you can tell by the way I act on Twitter, like it's there for fun. I like the jabbing back and forth with college. That's, to me, it's what makes college sports great, right? So I started seeing like, all right, well, this could be a new rivalry to take on. And at the time, K-State football was, if we're being honest here, at the time, K-State football was kind of mid. So it was like, hey, I need something. I need some action. I need something fun here. And it was like, all right, Iowa State program at a similar sort of level here. Like, let me just follow their lead. And so I started following their lead. And nothing against those guys. I guess the follower numbers are a little larger on my side. So maybe that's why I'm the one that it seems to gravitate towards the most now here at this point. But I will be completely honest with you and say that at times I feel like it's just like expected of me now at this point. And I feel like I get pressured into being into it more than I should. So like, I really, truly don't have anything fundamentally against Iowa State fans. It's just, it's taken on a life of its own. And I kind of feel like I can't stop it at this point,
To me, like, because I know exactly what you mean. Like, you can jab, like there's those Texas Tech guys I'm constantly going at it with, but it's all in good fun. It's like, I feel like I want to bounce this off of you. After the last really 10 years, like I've covered the Big 12 missile crisis, like 4 times now that's what I call it. But it feels like the leftovers, the hateful eight, whatever you want to call us. It's really hard to hate those teams. Like, to me, at least, like you can have your rivalries and you can have your fun, but I've never felt camaraderie in the Big 12 like I think exists right now. And I think that Texas and Oklahoma have a lot to do with that. But do you feel that too?
1,000%. I think you're spot on. To me, it's like there are 7 schools that I feel very fondly about and together. And it's not just because of the typical Kansas rivalry. It's because Kansas has been the school the entire time that I still think, kind of wants to be catcalling the Big Ten on the corner at every turn, right? And still holds an element of being superior to the rest of the bunch. So it's with the other 7. And I'm with you. After the Texas and Oklahoma thing, there was a period there. Well, I remember on Twitter, another little Twitter bit. I can remember, what did I say? Like a Farmageddon stand down or something. I forget what I was calling it, but I was like, I feel like, guys, we got to call off the horses here for a little bit. And that did last for a little while until, games actually started happening again. But I think you're totally right. And I think even like, I've seen like K-State fans bonding quite a bit with Texas Tech fans. I think like K-State, Tech, and Iowa State, trying to think, am I missing anybody in the league that in terms of the most like active, engaged Twitter fan bases? Because that to me is like the holy trinity.
Oklahoma State used to be. I don't feel like they are as much anymore, but definitely Kansas State, Iowa State, and Texas Tech are the ones that stand out to me, and they're pretty like-minded too. I mean, that's the thing. It's like if you were to ask me like to name a school in a town and a fan base that probably is the most similar to Iowa State, I would say Kansas State. And maybe that's why we're always at each other's throats, Like the guy, you're not supposed to marry somebody who's exactly like you, that type of thing.
Yeah, well, and it's like almost like brothers,
Yeah. Yeah.
you get cooped up long enough with your brother, and it's like, and maybe some, I always feel like some of it too is, and I would 2 points here. I would throw in Oklahoma State. I feel like Oklahoma State, K State, Iowa State, with Stillwater, Ames, Manhattan are
No
three
doubt.
just incredibly, incredibly similar schools, environments, towns,
Mm-hmm.
everything. And to me, a part of it was like, so Oklahoma State in this time span, they've been, if we're being honest, I mean, they've been the superior football product, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
superior football team and more consistent. They were just kind of on a different level. K-State and Iowa State was like, how many games in a row was it there that were like one score game, decided by 7 or
Absolutely.
less? I forget what it was at one point in time. And so it was just like every year it's coming down to the end. And it just seemed like some of that really sparked, I think, a lot of this. And then even within that, I mean, it's fascinating. I could talk about this a lot, but yet, like the 2015 game where somehow Paul Rhodes finds a way to lose that thing. And, Iowa State fans can look back on it and be like, well, hey, here comes Matt Campbell in the aftermath of that. Whereas I would say, and, to everybody, I know the Brock Purdy thing has become another one of those
Oh yeah,
hits.
I had like 15 people tweeting at me to make sure and bring that up.
Oh, I know. But see, I actually love the guy because, man, did he save K-State from being set back years in football. If he does not win that 2018 game, which, damn it, if they didn't try to lose that game, which is the most conflicted I think I've ever been as a K-State fan, not sure what to root for there. But if Bill Snyder wins that game and gets bowl eligible and then is going to be able to kick the can down the road a month on whether or not he was going to, I mean, that was a dicey situation already. And that would have, going into a pandemic, like it's not, and NIL and all that stuff, and where covering that 2018 season was one of the most stressful years that I've ever had, because every week Snyder was doing something like just kind of out of touch. You just knew the end was near. And boy, I am very thankful that Iowa State and Brock Purdy won that game in 2018. So look, I mean, commonalities there. We both brothers helping each other out.
I want to do a summer podcast on that where I learn more about that. Because, like when you're up here, you're kind of like hearing the rumors like, oh, he wants his kid to be the coach, and his kid who's like 50 or however old he is. But that the Kansas, we had a close eye on that the whole time. And that's always the thing that the Iowa State fans used to throw back at you. You can't really do it now. Be like, well, you can't win unless Bill Snyder's the coach. The last time you hired another guy, your program tanked.
Yeah.
No, Kleiman's great. He's a really good coach. I don't know how anybody can. Okay, let's talk about basketball because we do have limited time here. As both of our teams were picked towards the tail end of the Big 12, Iowa State is a lot like last year, what Kansas State is doing now. However, there is a big difference. Iowa State was kind of just middle of the pack. They kind of, bolted in the NCAA tournament to get to the Sweet 16, where Kansas State, like who in the hell thought January 23rd, they're in sole possession of first place in the Big 12 conference. I love Tang. The one thing I do, and I haven't seen you guys play a ton yet. We're kind of at that point where you're starting to see more and more games.
Right.
But both of these teams, I mean, if you were to say how are Iowa State and Kansas State doing so well, they're old. Like they're two of the top 30 oldest teams in college basketball, and like Tang and Otzelberger, like it's really kind of miraculous how you can just put all these pieces together who have never played together before and they can be so good. But like to me, that's it. When those two teams take the floor tomorrow night, it's a bunch of grown dudes. It's a bunch of Iowa State has one freshman who starts and he's got to go against a 5th-year senior as your point guard. But you're kind of like watching, it's like college basketball, but it's just all these 5th-year seniors, and you've got your guys is what top 6 scorers are all juniors and seniors, something like that. What's your perspective on this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point that you bring up, and it's funny. Earlier today, for the podcast that I do with Cole Manbeck and Derek Young Fremont, we had Gary Parrish on from CBS Sports, who's been a really big cheerleader for Jerome Tang, is very, very vocal in his support there. And we asked him, like, man, I mean, how unprecedented is this to see a first-year head coach and a first-time head coach now be in position? I mean, they're projected as a 1 seed in CBS Sports bracketology right now. They're in the top 5. Like, how unprecedented is that? And he said, well, I mean, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind and the closest thing I can remember seeing is last year with Iowa State and and TJ Otzelberger, and taking a team that was as bad as they were, reconstructing them into a respectable Big 12 team that then made a nice run in the NCAA tournament. So yeah, there are plenty of similarities there. And I mean, for Tang, I mean, he took over and immediately came in and said, and he was not really shy about this, and I kind of respect him for it, but he said basically there were 3 guys on the roster that I thought were Big 12 level players. And obviously one of those was Nigel Pack, who went on to Miami, got the bag, as the kids say, to go for $800,000 to Miami. And then he kept Ish Massoud and Marquise Noel. And from then on, I mean, they had to rebuild the entire roster, and they were patient with it, like slow and methodical, to the point where it was freaking all of us out. Like, we're kind of sitting around like, man, you have 6 players and the season is a couple months away. Like, what's going to happen here? And Keontae Johnson, fabulous story, had the heart issue, collapsed on the court at Florida a couple of years ago. Gary Parrish was telling us that he was hearing initially, like, they weren't sure whether or not he would live. And now he's here as an All-American. I mean, playing incredible. And they had to wait until the very last minute, really, to get him. Desi Sills, who is a guy who started on an Elite 8 team at Arkansas, who's kind of like the 3rd or 4th best weapon, probably offensively, for K-State, a guard, veteran, experienced. But he got on campus in like late August. I mean, they had already started practice by the time he got there. So it's just miraculous how they've been able to mold all these pieces together. They found Naquan Tomlin, who I think has NBA potential, like a really bouncy, athletic wing, just raw as hell, but played a couple years at JUCO ball, didn't even play high school basketball. He was playing at Rucker Park in New York. And now, I mean, he's kind of like the 3rd or 4th option as well that they have there too. So just a lot of kind of like an island of misfit toys thing. Then you have Marquise Noel, who's like, the size of Deuce Vaughn, but out there hitting logo threes, and they turned him from an honorable mention All Big 12 player to right now, I think, like probably a 3rd-team All-American sort of a guy. And he played a couple of years at Little Rock and was in the NCAA tournament. So yeah, a lot of these guys that have been around for a while, but just didn't seem to like totally fit, and they all had their flaws, and like Tang has been able to just pull them together. And I think, yeah, the experience does show a lot. I mean, they're pretty unflappable. Like the Kansas game, for instance.
Yeah.
Seeing that go to overtime. And I mean, I thought they were done at about 5 different points in that game, and they find a way to win. They're 4-0 in overtime. I guess that probably speaks to their age and maturity more than anything. So yeah, I think it's a very crucial part of what K-State's been able to do this year, is the fact that they do have a lot of experience.
I was almost more impressed by the Tech win, and hear me out. That's a bad spot, right? Like, you have this emotional win. You're starting to get all this national publicity. I know Tech is 0-7, but they can still literally beat anybody. Like, they lost to Kansas by 3. They were beating you guys at halftime, right? Like, this is still a team that on any given, they almost won in Austin. Kansas State starts off, I think they were beating you at halftime. If not, it was like tied or something like that, but it was a really good game there in the first half. Kansas State comes out refocused, re-energized in the second half, wins it by double digits. To me, I fully expected Kansas State to play a great game against Kansas because of everything that goes into that. That was classic letdown spot. And not only was it a letdown, but Kansas State was able to, fight back and find a way to win that one. And that, to me, was almost more impressive than the Kansas win last week.
Yeah, I mean, the sharp money in Vegas, I think, was really heavy on Tech. If you watch the line movement before that game, and I understand. I mean, it was 100% a letdown spot, and I think, Tang said after the game they even stopped at practice the first day back because he thought they just weren't focused. They sent them home and then came back and wouldn't tell us what they did, but did some kind of activity to help get them refocused, and thought that worked. But I think there was some of that there. And that led to the first half. But also, I mean, credit to it's also just a representation of the Big 12, right? I mean, Tech being your last place team, especially now that they've got AMAC back in the lineup. That's a pretty salty team, and Tech turned it into the kind of grinder that they really needed it to be. And K-State was just struggling. Even the crowd, I think, had a hangover. It was full. I mean, it was filled up, sold out, but just there was no energy in the building until the second half. And they finally got a couple plays, and then it really sparked everything. And it got going. But yeah, it was a mature win, for sure. A mature win, because I think a lot of K-State teams get beat in that spot. Even some of the better K-State teams that I can remember, speaking of Iowa State, the Jacob Pullen team, to me, this team that K-State has this year is the most exciting team that they've had since 2009, 2010, which was Jacob Pullen, Denny Clemente, Curtis Kelly, They went to the Elite Eight. They beat Xavier in double overtime, that crazy NCAA tournament game. That team was 29-8. And I remember on Denny Clemente's senior day, I'm still mad about it. They lost to an Iowa State team that was not, I mean, you could tell me what that Iowa State team was like in Bramlage. They lost on Denny Clemente's freaking senior day. So, like, they didn't have the kind of focus. And they lost to a bad Oklahoma State team that year, too, at home. So, yeah, a lot of K-State teams have lost in that spot.
That was Greg McDermott's final Big 12 game. Now, they went to the Big 12 tournament and lost their first game there, but that was Greg McDermott's last Big 12 regular season game. I remember that. I used to do a post-game show that went live 2 hours after every Iowa State Big 12 game, and I did it during the thick of the McDermott era. So there are these nights I'm going on live at like midnight to talk about a team that had one win in the league, and here we are. And I remember that was the last show I ever did for that, because that year just sucked the life right out of me. And then they beat Kansas State that night. It was kind of a party. I remember a lot of people showed up. That's the only reason I would remember that game. All right. So I think that for the preview aspect of this, for your Kansas State fans who are watching on your YouTube feed, Iowa State, it's possible it could be down 2 starters tomorrow night.
That's why I was like, man, I forgot to ask you before we even went on the air what's going on with Caleb Grill. I was kind of bummed about that. Like, I want, I want this matchup to be as awesome as it can be. And I would prefer, honestly, Caleb Grill plays.
I'm guessing he's going to play. I mean, he tried to give it a go he still almost played 20 minutes. Like, we're acting like this guy, was at the end of the bench, like not able to move. Like, he played almost 20, but he wasn't himself. I know Caleb. I would be surprised if he doesn't give it a go, but then it becomes of like, is he hurting the team being out there? Like, how healthy is, I mean, not the same thing, but a similar deal to Patrick Mahomes. I thought when he went back out there, I know you're a Chiefs guy, watch your feed. I thought when he went out there the other night, no, like, this is going to be detrimental. He can't even put weight on it. And, and they figured it out. So, like, but my thing is, now I'm comparing Caleb Grill to Patrick Mahomes. Your followers are going to love that. But that's a very real thing. Like, Caleb's become an elite perimeter defender, because Iowa State has 2 of them, and Gabe Kalsher and Caleb Grill. And he's out of that game. And Oklahoma State hit like 7 threes in the second half, and they're a terrible 3-point shooting team. So it impacted Iowa State greatly, him being out of there. Kuntz, they've kind of been playing without now for a while, so you feel like that they've kind of found their win. But that's really what it comes down to for me. I don't think Hilton's terrifying for most teams. Kansas State, I just don't know. They're so old. I just don't know if they're going to be phased too much by it. Texas was. They got rattled. They didn't want to be there in the second half. But that's a big difference for me. Like, if Iowa State doesn't have Grill, or let's say they get him for 10 minutes, I actually think Kansas State will win. They're a 5-point underdogs. We saw the line. The line's out. Iowa State is still favored in this one. But that's asking a lot of an Iowa State team that struggles with bodies to begin with. It's deeper than they have been, but being 2 starters down is really, I just don't know if it's attainable against a team that, again, if the NCAA tournament started right now, would be a 1 seed. That seems like a really tall task to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I don't have the greatest feeling in the world going into this game myself on this side. Now, a part of this is I think I'm still in this kind of shock where I'm like, this is too good to be true, right? Like, the other shoe has to drop at some point. Like, this team was unanimously picked last in the Big 12 this year, and I thought they'd be a tournament team. I legitimately did, but I did not expect anything like this. And even through the non-con, I mean, they were really trending toward being a bubble team. I'm trying to think of like a good Big 12 comp. I don't know, maybe like an Oklahoma-ish sort of team. Mm-hmm. And they've just totally flipped the switch in conference play. But the part about Hilton that makes me nervous, and look, I mean, I've been to a couple games at Hilton. It was back in the Frank Martin era, and even back then when it was not the greatest Iowa State teams in the world. Place is loud. I mean, I know full well just what kind of an environment that can be in. And look, K-State had tremendous road wins at Texas and Baylor. And the Moody Center, I will give Texas credit. They did
way better.
Great job with that, as opposed to the Drum and just the most sterile atmosphere in sports that they had going before.
Horrible.
Yeah, so like it's better, but I mean, it ain't Hilton.
Do you ever cover a game there at the old Irwin Center or whatever the hell it was
I
called?
didn't. I was traveling with football for 10 years when I was still working full time in the profession, but I never got to cover a game in the Drum. I wish I had.
I mean, you're walking around like from the media area to the locker room. It's like an old bomb shelter. Like you can't believe like this is Texas's basketball arena. The first game I ever called there, like I was just in shock with how awful that place was. I haven't been there yet. Iowa State plays there in a couple weeks, but yeah, it's like a totally. And I just like, I don't know. We can talk about the league for a minute. Like I keep waiting. For a while, I kept thinking, oh, Kansas State, people are going to start to scout them. They'll come back to earth a little bit, be a 4th or 5th place team. And I've kind of had the same feeling about Texas ever since the Beard situation. It's like, how much can they keep this thing on the rails? We are, for the record, recording this at 7:30 right now on Monday. So anything that happens in Kansas Baylor, we don't know yet. But like, and then you got Kansas, like they could lose 3 in a row right now. So it's just like, I don't know. Like we were doing this on our Cyclone Fanatic podcast last night. Like who should be the favorite to win the league right now? And my take was it should be Kansas, but I feel like, I could make an argument for Kansas. I think I could make a pretty strong argument for you guys, to be honest. I just like this Texas coach doesn't impress me. I just don't think he's great. Their talent's pretty good, but like, we kind of know Marcus Carr. Like Tyrese Hunter is a good player, but obviously we know this, but he's still a 30% 3-point shooter, right? Like he's not. You have a better point guard. Frankly, like, and it's not really close at this point. Who do you think is the favorite in the league?
God, it's a really tough question. I mean, look, I am in deference. I feel like I have to just say Kansas. I mean, I do think, I'll say this through gritted teeth, but I mean, I think Bill Self's the best coach going in college basketball right now. He just always seems to find a way and figure it out. So, I mean, I think they very well could lose a 3rd straight tonight and then still win the league. So I'll just say that out of default. But I mean, K-State deserves mentioning. They've won at Baylor, they've won at Texas, and they've beaten Kansas at home.
That's the key for me is where you've won.
Yeah.
That's a huge plus. And Iowa State has that with that win against TCU, right? That's going to be a really good win.
Yeah, how the hell do you beat TCU after watching K-State just get absolutely blitzed? That is one that puzzles me. And then watching them, I saw a lot of the game in Lawrence. I'm like, how does anybody beat them? So yeah, that impresses the hell out of me.
I think they could run I really do. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they'd win like 10 in a row.
We were having that discussion, the guys that I do my pod with yesterday, and someone was like, TCU, they've got a great upper echelon, upper end there, but they're not consistent enough. I was like, I would not be shocked at all if TCU won the league or won a share of the league. Those guys, when they get out and run, like if you start turning the ball over, they get out and run. I mean, they just make you look silly. They make Kansas look silly. They made K-State look very silly. So I think they're very much capable of doing that too. I think they deserve to be in the discussion for sure.
All right. As we wrap this up, and John and I want to do this again, and we will, and we'll get more in depth on how insufferable John can be to Iowa State fans. Kidding. Because a lot of people wanted me to talk to you about the Al Nazard, the no pass interference call where they waved the flag off. You know the game I'm talking about.
I think the 2017. I think.
Yeah. That's anyways, we can all agree that we find common ground here, just how much we hate the Pac-12, right? Like, I mean, we can all just get on that boat because I love watching you jab at the guys out on the West Coast. It's a good time.
Man, that has been another interesting rivalry that I never really knew would pop up in my life. Like I didn't have that on my bingo board that I was going to become rivals of the Pac-12, but it's really a lot of it for me. It's not even so much like that one's not one where you're getting mad at their fans, right? That much because there aren't any. Like there are not. I mean, that is the least engaged conference that I've ever seen on Twitter, but it was more like the media mouthpieces there. And like John Wilner, I respect John Wilner a lot. And I think he's the most plugged in there. It's like John Canzano is the one where I'm like, okay, like, and I know he rolls his eyes and looks at me and like, okay, YouTube guy that's doing the same thing, being a shill for the Big 12. But yeah, it was like some of the Canzano. I'm like, and they still take questions in their mailbag. I read Wilner's mailbag every week because it is good stuff. I mean,
very good. He came on with me and was awesome. Like and I jabbed at him, and he was awesome. So yeah, Canzano's the one. It's just, he came out with his column today, and it's all Larry Scott's fault. Everything, dating back. It's like, come on, man. Like,
That's
I, don't
I mean,
stop that. I'm cheering you on. Sometimes I'm not necessarily in the mix, but I'm back there watching.
yeah, no, I could feel like all of us behind that to the Pac-12. It's just they still take. There was a question in the mailbag last week from Wilner that was like, "Hey, what if?" And I forget what the scenario was, but it was like, and then the Pac-12 adds San Diego State, like, okay, checks out. SMU, okay, checks out, and then TCU, and I'm like, what? How are there people still suggesting that is a possibility? Like TCU leaked on I was calling it not a short list, but a medium list for the Big Ten at one point within the last year, where it was like they were like seventh or eighth down on the list, but they were ahead of Kansas, on the Big Ten list. Like, look, they're not going to the Pac-12. So yeah, we could all join forces there, man. That Pac-12 stuff is ridiculous.
The Kansas thing's wild to me. Like, from what I understand, and I'm like I say, I've been doing this. I'll be almost 20 years in this league, but it doesn't seem like there's even like an appetite from the Big Ten to add them. From what I've gathered, what do you hear? Like, is this all like from Kansas sources keeping that in the media?
I mean, look, if you guys think that, you guys think Iowa State, like you guys are not my only enemies out there, right? So like, I don't know how much you follow Mike Vernon, who used to be a beat
Yeah, that's the guy who's always starting the deal, right? With Kansas.
Yeah, yes. And he's the one that famously said on 610 Sports in Kansas City, like, within the week of Texas and Oklahoma, that news breaking. I mean, it was like a day or two later. He went on the air and said he was being told that it was imminent that Kansas would go to the Big Ten. And, I mean, I try not to let him forget that, as much as he would like to tell you that was not what actually happened. There is audio proof out there of it. But yeah, I mean, so he's a guy that's connected, and I think legitimately is connected within the athletic department, and probably more so to some upper level donors. But to me, it just showcased like the hubris that's there at Kansas, where the donors and administration immediately thinks like, oh, well, I mean, of course we're going to be well positioned for the Big Ten. The problem there is you just see basketball hubris and not understanding that, like, to me, it's like an exchange rate, right? Like the currency, the dollar does not hold the same value in basketball that it does in football. And I apologize, my camera does that every like 20 minutes. The currency in basketball, like the exchange rate is worse. You're getting like 25 cents on the dollar with a powerhouse basketball program that you are for football. And like Kansas fans don't realize that. I've grown up in Kansas City. I live here now. And trust me, Kansas is basically the NBA team of Kansas City. So you see it everywhere. And it's just, people have grown up like this. They're not used to adversity. They're not used to taking losses. They think that this is the be all end all, and they just don't understand the realities of the situation with a basketball program. And I guess, if you want to tack on the AAU thing too, but I think it's all of that, and all of that extends up to donors and people in the athletic department who just have a higher view of what that basketball program actually means in the larger scale realignment wise than what the reality is. So I think it's that, and he's, getting the word from people who have wishful thinking, I think, in the Kansas athletic department of all that. And to be fair, like, I'll say this about that whole situation, like, he's doing kind of the same thing. He's found a way to monetize what he does, and good for him on that front. But yeah, I think it's created a lot of Kansas fans with their head too far in the sky as far as all of that goes. So I've not heard like anything really legitimate about it at all. I mean, now I will not claim I was a K-State beat guy essentially for 10 years, but I won't claim to have great sources within the league or anything, especially now. I mean, your Mark's in town. It's a totally new regime. Like I'm out of touch when it comes to that. So I don't have crazy inside sources or anything, but anybody with any level of, veracity and what they do has not told me that there's anything legitimate to it at all. So
I'm more interested anymore in the Gonzaga thing. I just feel like there's real smoke there. That feels, I won't use the word imminent to quote your friend, but like my whole thing is like that. The way that all came out seemed very, I don't know, fabricated in a way. It felt like somebody wanted that news to get out. Usually when you get to the point where, there's these meetings that are happening, like, but my biggest thing though, John, is what happens after that. Are they, because if you get Gonzaga, like, do you get one, like, or do you start going to like these Big East schools, right? Like because he's such an East Coast guy. I'm fascinated by it, and I also think that there might be, your Mark's talked about like business and taking care of or taking advantage of any opportunities you have. And I just feel like with basketball right now in this league, especially with the teams coming in, if you could add like Gonzaga and I'm just throwing it Creighton, a basketball only school, or Georgetown or whatever, like Villanova, I don't know. I feel like there is some money to be made down the road though. From that, I just hope that they don't go overboard. Like if they try and play the Big 12 tournament in New York City, I'll lose my mind. Like I will boycott the league if that happens because I'm such a big fan of it in Kansas City. But as far as that goes, like I'm way more interested in the Gonzaga thing right now than anything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you and me both on the Big 12 tournament. I now live literally about 2 blocks away from Sprint Center. So if they move the tournament, damn tournament at this point, I will be pretty upset. But
we got to get together then, man. I love that week. We got to have a beer this year.
Yeah, hey, absolutely, man. Like Power and Light. I mean, it's one stop down the streetcar from me. So yeah,
beautiful.
I'm right in that area. But yeah, I think the Gonzaga thing to me clearly was strategically leaked, and that's where I think like Yormark is just such a master marketer. And I think he just runs circles around George Kliavkov, who just, I know this latest thing isn't really his fault, but he just can't control the news cycle. Everything seems to be negative. He got his emails leaked recently that kind of proved he was lying about, or at the best, like bending the truth about the whole Big 12 Pac-12 merger thing and who shut down those talks. Meanwhile, Yormark, the Pac-12 has talked to Gonzaga. Wilner has reported that, so I do trust it. But that didn't get out there and make a bunch of news cycles. But Brett Yormark gets Pete Thamel to report about it, the head honcho at ESPN, and then it turns into a story. And the Big 12's in the news cycle and generating a lot of, fairly positive, I think, reception with that, or at least discussion. Like, I just think he's brilliant and really well connected with things like that. And he is able to plant things and get those sorts of things out. Whether or not it actually happens, I mean, that'll be really interesting. But I think it's possible it could be like a Villanova. It could be a Creighton. I just think Yormark has tricks up his sleeve and we don't really even know where he's going, because like the Gonzaga thing, would not have guessed that in a million years. I mean, that came out of nowhere. So some people will say, Pac-12 people will probably tell you, like, be leery of this guy, slick used car salesman type. I'm like, I don't know. Everything he's done so far, I can see how you get that impression, but it's been pretty damn effective so far. So I just put my faith in him and think we're probably in for some twists and turns. And I think, look, investing heavily in basketball, if there's nothing that you can really do on the football front for now, and you just have to kind of sit around and wait for the 4 corner schools and see if the Pac-12 further destabilizes, hell yeah, why not just lean into the basketball thing and create as much extra value there as you can, especially when, here's one thing that I will say about, and I don't think the 4 corner schools thing is happening anytime soon, but Arizona would be the first one to pop loose. No doubt. The scenario with Arizona is that is a school that cares deeply about basketball. And if the Pac-12 goes the route of like hardcore Amazon, where it's not going to be as widely distributed and they will take extra money while sacrificing exposure, one of the places that'll hurt the most is basketball. And Arizona would be the school that's going to be the most upset about that. So if the Pac-12 does that, and then you go out and add Gonzaga, Villanova, whoever it might be, and you create this super conference in basketball, Arizona's going to be looking at this like, hey, we can make basically the same amount of money here. We can be in a more stable environment, not having to look over our shoulder at what Oregon and Washington are doing all the time. And then we'll go to a place where they love and revere and respect basketball. And then once they go, can you get Colorado? And so I think that's the path and the long-term play there for the Big 12. Yeah.
And then who knows if this Deion Sanders thing, what Colorado's value is in 5 years, or if he's even still there, we'll see. All right, John, I would love to do this all night, but I have little girls that I've got to get to bed. I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun. I love giving you shit on Twitter. It's a blast for me. I don't know why I've always liked you. Everybody hates you, and I'm like, no, I can see through that guy. He knows what he's doing. I can just tell you're just twisting the knife a little bit. You're doing exactly what my co-host Brent Bloom does to Iowa fans all the time. So I respect it.
Well, I appreciate that. And man, I appreciate you doing this. And like, I enjoy the opportunity actually to be able to just like talk like this, because this is the thing. Like, I have fun with Twitter and I do enjoy it, but we all get a little carried away sometimes. And sometimes we're sitting there like, damn it, man, did you have to do that? Like, did you need to pick that fight? Like, and so look, I don't I don't hate you guys. It's all in good fun.
You hear that, guys?
I understand some people are going to be like, whatever, screw you. And that's fine. But I do it. I feel like so often, like if we could all just sit and have a beer in Power and Light instead of being, with our Twitter fingers, we would find out that we are much more alike than not. So yes, that would be my message. Wait, I have one question for you. Okay. So
yeah.
I forgot about this. I was going to ask this when you brought up Tyrese Hunter. Did I see you tweet that they were not letting the students say Tyrese, like say his name during that game?
I got to the arena a little bit later. I got there about an hour and a half before tip, and like it was right as the students came in. And one of our local TV reporters, a student told him that they were told if they say Tyrese's name that they would be asked to leave. So yeah, like he reported that, like with this student saying it, and then clearly, I mean, like the whole student section was chanting F Tyrese like half the game.
Okay.
And and Otts isn't like, your coach will just get on the mic and be like, hey, hey guys, we need to cheer.
Right.
The Tang thing's really interesting, like how he's doing that. I read some story from Dennis Dodd today about how for the first time you're playing like one of those old rock songs and you guys aren't
Sandstorm. Yeah.
You're not chanting FKU for the first time in like history.
It goes back to basically when I was in school. We're talking like 12, 13 years ago. Yeah, it's crazy.
So you guys were chanting FKU in like the middle of like a Texas game. You hate them that much.
Like in the middle of the biggest problem was when it started the Wabash Cannonball, right, which is basically one of the two fight songs. They started figuring out the cadence to doing that, and it would happen during a football game against North Texas, whoever you rolled in for the first night, South Dakota, right? You're playing South Dakota in football, and you'd hear it there, and it was like, okay, guys, like even me, I'm like, this is getting a little out of control. And
Tang's just like, knock it off. Basically.
Tang has been able to. He was going into the student section to basically try and encourage them to not do it during football games. Like he has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this, and has legitimately stopped it. And it is. I would have told you it would take a decade's worth of work to make it happen. But when you combine it with the way he's winning, obviously people are going to listen a little bit more. So, yeah, it's been crazy. I saw that thing about the Tyrese. I was like, come on, man, let the kids have fun. Like that is generally my attitude. So that's why I wanted to ask, because I was like, listen. And I fully support the kids being able to transfer. Like I've been ahead of the curve on that. But that doesn't mean that I like the kid transferring within the conference to like the power in the conference when they've been at a place like the Iowa State to Texas move. I hate it. Texas Tech to Kansas with Kevin McCullough, right? I hate it. So like, I don't want those guys to have success. So I was like, all right, I was frustrated if that was going to be the case at Iowa State.
On top of it too, so it's Texas in the heat of this whole Big 12 thing. Iowa State's kind of like the anti-Texas as far as like finances go, and like you go to downtown Austin and walk downtown Ames. All right, like pretty different location. But two, like Tyrese leaned into this. Like he was running his mouth on Twitter in the summer and stuff like that, and like it's just part of the deal. And I thought it was a really good night for Iowa State because they got that out of their system. But by the end of the night, the Tyrese Hunter thing seemed like such a backstory because it was a really good game and Iowa State won. So that wasn't really, and they shut him down and he had a really good start to it, but he didn't score for the last like 30 minutes of that basketball game. So it wasn't even really a thing. And it was just a good night for Iowa State. So that's kind of what you're hoping for. All right. Well, we'll do this again.
Yes.
I promise. This will be fun. We should do some of these in the off season too. I think looking forward to football when things are getting long. So he is John Kurtz. For an Iowa State fan, real quick, describe how to find you on your YouTube channel and all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So the YouTube is just my name, John, John, Kurtz, Kurtz. I do 2 live shows a week. I'm actually about to go live here in a second when we hop off here. So
all right.
2 live shows a week. It's all Big 12. That's not K-State centric. In fact, I try to kind of purposely, as much as I can, stay away from K-State there. It's all Big 12 conference realignment, very conference realignment heavy with all of that. So definitely we got a great community. There's like 16,000 Big 12 fans there. A lot of the new schools have fans that have come in there. It's been really cool to get to know the new schools there. So I think that's a really great thing. If you want to be an involved Big 12 fan, if you do want a K-State specific, you can listen to my podcast, 3Ma, like EMA, but with a 3.
I'll pass on that one, but I'll watch the YouTube. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, do I even need to tell you that you can find me on Twitter? It's at Jalen Hurts on Twitter. If you want some content there, that's another way to do it.
If you're listening to this, and I'll tag him on my Twitter feed. You guys can find John if you want to. So, and then for those on the K-State feed, thanks for letting me crash your party. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Okay.
Sounds good, Chris. Take care.